Well, hey folks, welcome back. We're going to be looking at something that was a fun project for me to do, and I was inspired by a book. I've never listened to Warhammer books before. Somebody recommended to me in a Facebook group I should read, or actually I did the Audible version of Steel Tread. I'll have to put the writer's name in text because I can't remember. I wasn't sure what to expect from a Warhammer book, but you know what? It was pretty good. I really liked it. And I have recently been getting back into Warhammer. I'm not sure, honestly, if I'm going to play or I'm just going to kind of rebuild a new army because I really enjoy the building more than I ever enjoyed playing. But, I've discovered some folks that I can actually play with around my local area here. And, I am Imperial Guard until I die. The idea was I wanted to make a Steel Tread. And so for anybody that's not familiar with the story Steel Tread, it is about, I have no idea what random piece this is. Sorry. Steel Tread is about a Cadian tank crew who receives a new commander who is not Cadian. The Cadian tank crew has some crew members from other worlds besides Cadia. This new commander has fought in a standard Leman Russ, battle cannon tank. Her old commander was killed. She was the gunner. She had to take over. Now she's been transferred into a Cadian unit as they consolidate forces. There's some issues because Cadians, if you know, Cadians fight with Cadians, and they don't believe other planetary forces can fight the way Cadians can. So it's an issue of the Cadians and the non-Cadians, and now they have to deal with a non-Cadian tank commander. The tank that she is assigned to is a very old Leman Russ Demolisher named Steel Tread, and of course they're fighting heretics and traitors, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it's actually a really good story. So I wanted to create a Steel Tread. So if you look at the two Leman Russ models in front of you, you will see that what would become my Steel Tread here is a bit bigger than a standard Leman Russ, and I'm going to explain why. I'll tell you first off, Steel Tread is 100% 3D printed on an FDM printer. This is an actual Games Workshop Russ model that I'm working on right now. It has some 3D printed, details on it. It actually has some value gear sandbags added to it, so it's got some accessories. It has all of the other weapons in a 3D printed tray that can be stored inside. We'll probably talk more about this setup later as it gets finished, but because if you're familiar with the story of Steel Tread, I wanted something that would be, if it's going to be on the tabletop, I just wanted it to be a little bit bigger and I wanted it to stand out. And of course I painted this and marked it as part of my army. So none of my tanks wear Cadian camouflage, but Steel Tread, I wanted to wear a Cadian camouflage. And the story behind my regiment is that I call it the 423rd Cadian Remnants Regiment. And the story behind it, my personal fluff, is that it is a regiment made out of survivors of other regiments that have basically become combat ineffective, because of battles. They take people that are left over, they put them into this one regiment. So it's very combat experienced, but that way, that's my excuse for if I want to do two squads in one camouflage, if I want to do two tank squadrons in one camouflage and some in another. Some people feel like all their units have to match completely. Sometimes I want to try something different. So having them in the Remnants Regiment is my excuse to say, all right, these things are painted different than the other because they were moved over from another unit on another planet, fighting another battle. They were left and they came and joined this regiment. So Steel Tread came in its Cadian markings and was just given a little touch-up for the markings for the regiment and how it would fit in that way. If you look here, and it might not be that easy to see on camera, but this is a little bit bigger. Just a little bit bigger. So I found the STL file on, I believe it's 3D Cults, and I believe they have the STL file for this whole thing on 3D Cults, Printables, Thingiverse, and everything. It is a solid print. A lot of prints are hollowed out to make them easier. This is one solid print, so it's a little heavy, a little bit heavy. The turret here, the cannon's not movable. There's no means to do that in this model. In fact, the cannon that's in here, the Demolisher cannon, I just really like this style. It's actually not from the STL files that came from this. I had another download of just weapons, and I used it because I just liked the way it looked. And we're going to talk about all the ways I kind of changed this, because Steel Tread is just described as a Demolisher tank. So I felt a little creative license to change it up a little bit. But what is directly from the actual STL file from this tank is everything you see here on the hull, except the smoke launchers. But this is how it comes, and it's kind of cool because it's a very different looking tank. So we have, of course, kind of standard Russ sides and tracks. We have a pretty standard looking hull, more of an older style hull than the newer style. If you take a look at the front bow shape there, a little bit older. This light is molded in. And by the way, this is my first attempt ever, at as long as I've been doing models, whatever, at trying to paint some OSL. It did not come out the way I liked it, but it is what it is. The bow-mounted cannon, you have options for what weapon to put in there, but it does not move. I just used a regular, laser cannon there because that's what they described Steel Tread has in the book. For the sponsons, it comes with bolters. They are printed like this in the sponson axles like that. But that's okay because Steel Tread has heavy bolters in the sponson weapons. And, in the book, you get to meet the sponson gunners and the whole crew and everything. So that's not a problem. The actual individual pieces on this print right here is, so you've got one hull piece. You've got, this is solid one piece. You've got the actual bow weapon that goes in. You've got this, so on the regular Russ model, you have this little box for the hull. This is a huge one-piece box. It actually has the Mechanicus symbol on the back of this. So I sanded that down, and I actually made a mold with green stuff of that right there. And then, I made a mold, with blue stuff, and then molded it in green stuff and stuck it on. The exhaust here, that's one piece. Whatever this thing is, that's one piece. And then I added this from another kit. What kit? I can't remember, but this is supposed to be optics that you could mount on a gun, on a main gun, but I just put it there as like kind of tail lights. Everything else you see, this whole hull is one piece. Oh, I'm sorry, no. And this vent, and that vent is molded in, but this vent came from another download of just, they call it greebles that you can stick on here. The turret is one piece, and then I added, what did I add? So I added the cannon from the Demolisher cannon from a separate file. I added the heavy stubber here from another file because I wanted to, it had storm bolters in the book, but I kind of like heavy stubbers, and I think I've done enough research, 10th edition, that storm bolt, the heavy stubber just is a little bit better weapon than storm bolters. So if I am going to play this on a tabletop, I have the better weapon on there. This is an infrared searchlight, or so that the file says. I'm just using it as a searchlight. And again, I know it's not great OSL. It's, again, my first time. I've never really tried to do it before, so I figured I'd give it a shot. This is an antenna mount piece that I put on there, and I will mount an antenna in it. And this is a little, whatever that is. I don't know. I like the look of it. So I mounted it on there. That piece right there. And yeah, and that door actually too. Sorry. So there's a lot of little pieces. This panel with like an access door, I put that on there too. This printed exactly as it is with the not the Aquila, but the the winged skull that you see on lots of Cadian armor pieces, Imperial Guard armor pieces, printed right with that. So that was pretty convenient because I like that a lot. The hatch printed shut right in the whole piece here in the hull. So piece of cake. And the whole printing on this, and I'll show you what the actual pieces are, how they look in the slicer. If you don't know what a slicer is, the slicing program is what actually takes your STL files. The STL files it looks like graphics, but there is a series of triangle kind of graphics things that make up the shape. Then you can adjust things in the slicer. What it does is you adjust them how you want them on your print bed. And if you want to, in most slicers, you can't change the shapes, but what you can do is you can change dimensions a little bit. So if you want to make things a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, you can do that. But you can line them up. You can decide how many pieces you want to print at once. That's why you can organize things on your print bed if you're doing more than one at a time. Then that slicer program will convert your STL file, your graphical files showing you what you're printing, into something called G-code. G-code is what 3D printers and CNC machines and anything of the like to instruct the machine how to move and what tools to use. In a full multi-tool CNC machine, it's a lot more complicated because there are tool change commands, and in most CNCs and 3D printers, there's only 3 axes. There's X, Y, and Z. You can get some really serious heavy-duty industrial CNC machines that have up to 5 axes. So not only are they moving the object on the bed, they're also spinning the tools in different angles in time and space and everything like that. I don't think there's any 3D printers that actually do that. I mentioned this is an FDM printer, so this is the one where you put a roll of filament in it. This is not a resin printer. Resin will give you much finer detail. For example, if I'm going to do a figure or something small with fine detail, even if I was just going to print this tank again, if I did it in resin, I'd get a much finer resolution and finer detail. This does pretty good if you know how to set the settings. And I've been learning that 3D printing, a lot of it is all about learning the settings and figuring out what settings to do. You can get pretty good detail with an FDM printer if you know how to do the settings and set the right speed and the right temperature on the filament. But you're never going to get as good detail with filament as you will with resin. But resin is also a more complicated process, and we're not going to get into that now. So this actual tank, if you were to reduce it to 80% of what it is, would end up being the same size as a regular Leman Russ. I left it bigger because I wanted steel tread to be a little bit of a bigger, more imposing tank. And again, if you read and if you know Warhammer and how the like weapons have their machine spirit, and how the crew will actually pray to the machine spirit and talk to the machine spirit. The gunners will pray to their guns and their scopes and everything. I mean, so steel tread is a very impressive tank, and every Leman Russ has its own machine spirit. And in the real military, by the way, we believe the same thing. We just don't call it a machine spirit, but we know that if you have a company of tanks, every tank has its own quirks. So you might say, Delta 1-6 is prone to do this. Delta 2-6 does a little bit of it. You know what I mean? Like the different tank numbers. Because as machines wear in differently, they just have their own little quirks and stuff. Same thing with jets, individual weapons. So anyway, the Warhammer universe it just takes it to a more spiritual level. So to get everything printed, this is probably a total of not constant printing, but printing, removing it from the print bed, taking, sleeping. I don't let the printer go all night, cleaning the pieces up a little bit, putting it together. There's probably a good 3 or 4 days just in the printing in this, and then assembling the model. Like these tracks themselves, believe it or not, it's like a 6-hour print just to do the track because of things. I'm not going to talk too much about 3D printing. Once I got it all assembled, I'm not a big fan. Like, Citadel paints are great. I'm not a big fan of Citadel paints. I really prefer some other paints, and I will still use Citadel paints, don't get me wrong. I used to use them for all my Warhammer stuff. I still have, a handful of them of colors that are very specific that don't have a real good direct translation to other brands, and some washes, but I found that the colors, and what did I use? I used Gunship Green from Vallejo Model Air, and I used Khaki, just from Game Color. And they're very good approximations for the two colors, for Xandri Dust and what is it, Castellan green, that you would use from Citadel to paint the standard Cadian camouflage. But I like brush painting with them. You don't really need to do some kind of ratio with water, thin them down a little bit. They're kind of thinned already out of the bottle. So this is brush painted. It's all brush painted to get the usual hard edge camo without having to do, some kind of mask or anything like that. I just freehand painted it all around, and it was originally nice and clean. There's no indication in the book, like there's no description of the camouflage pattern, so I just did my own, knowing that in Cadian vehicle camouflage, it's 30% Xandri dust and 70% green. So that's what I did. Of course, it's got a base coat of Vallejo black primer, just black primer in general across the whole thing. And then I used detail paints of all the different brands I usually use: Vallejo, Ammo of MiG, AK Interactive, some Citadels, some Scale 75, whatever, for my unit marking colors here. These are specifically AK Interactive colors, which their new 3rd generation, I've been using a lot more of. They thin very easily for airbrush painting, and they brush paint on really nicely and really clean. So I've been using a lot of those colors, and on my new figures as well. So that came out pretty good. One of the things I use in my Remnants Regiment is what I call a unifying color. All of my units will have a specific color applied somewhere on the vehicle, and that is this metallic blue. And this is not a fancy paint. This is just an arts and crafts paint that I got some time ago. And what is this? Oh, so this is what I use for the highlight color, and it's just Createx pearlized blue paint in a big bottle that I use. But so this color is on every single vehicle somewhere, sometimes more prominent than others. And like you can see here, for the Imperial Guard winged skull, I do the top edges of the wings in that blue. So that kind of brings all the vehicles together. Like says, they are all in this regiment together, even though they all have different camouflage sometimes, or you'll see multiple camouflages. Kind of use that. And it also goes on one of the shoulder pauldrons of all the troops, and some equipment. That way, everybody knows that they all are in this 423rd Cadian Remnant. So after Steel Tread left its regiment and came over to the 423rd Cadian Remnants, it got some painting in that blue color. Not a whole lot, just enough to signify it. So I used the gun shield on the heavy stubber for that. Most of the metallic you see is gunmetal by Ammo of MiG, and then matte aluminum as a highlighting color. And you can see I really weathered this up. So the first thing I did after I did all the painting, I gave it its first wash in Agrex Earthshade to give it some earthy tones. And then I did some real heavy dry brushing with the matte aluminum color, because we're talking about, a 10,000-year-old tank. So before I even went on and did any of the detail colors, I really wanted to make sure that we had not just chipped paint, but we had fading paint from all kinds of use all over this. And so you see that, and it's subtle, but it's observable everywhere on here. Worn, just people stepping all over it, just worn everywhere paint. I also, by the way, did the standard Games Workshop, edge highlighting with different lighter colors and everything. I specifically cannot remember what I used for those right now. But a lot of that got covered up by dry brushing and edge painting in metallics for some more chipped and worn paint. You can still see it here and there, but you can't see it very well. So the main metallic color is, for the worn away, is the matte aluminum, and then for metallic pieces, it's a base of gunmetal and with a highlight. Like, for example, you can see on this laser cannon here, it's the gunmetal with a highlight of the matte aluminum. Matte aluminum's really good because it gives you kind of the bright look of silver without being shiny, which is much more appropriate, I think, to a military metal color. which is going to, you know, it's going to show us highlights and stuff, but it's not going to be shiny and looking like it might be polished. It's just wearing through. So after we did the edge highlighting and after we did the dry brushing with the, you know, matte aluminum, then I started to really do some serious edge highlights and a little bit of corner highlighting, again with just a heavier coat of the matte aluminum to really show some wear and tear around the corners and places where we might get some more serious wear around the tank. And you can see that a lot on the turret. Places where metal might meet different objects, doors would open and close, people might step around. Areas like the edges of the armor panels where, you know, as the tank's moving around, different debris might come up and hit it, things like that. So we have that all over the place. Then I gave another wash of Nuln Oil just to kind of make sure we had some good contrast in panel lines. You can see how the Agrax Earthshade sort of gave us some darker stains across and really gave everything, kind of combined the brown and the green into more of an earthy overall tone, made it look older and a little beat up. And then the Nuln Oil really settled in around recesses and over some raised details and then into the seams, panel lines and everything, to really give us those dark shades to show us some grime and everything inside and around. I think I did, gunmetal again just for the tracks. Then I painted the track pads in Vallejo dark rubber, which you can see a few of the track pads sticking out here. Then I used a Vallejo enamel rusty track wash all over there. And I also used it on the exposed areas of the exhaust in the back. Once that was dry, I gave that a little wash of Nuln Oil to settle in all the crevices there. You can't see any of that now because I piled on the mud after that. But, you know, the work is there and we know it's there. So that works out. By the way, I was able to find these great smoke launchers where the STL file automatically had them drilled out. So I was able to print them like this in place, which is so much better than just a flat edge on them or having to drill them. That worked out pretty nicely in my favor. Working on this OSL feature, which I'm not, again, like I said, I'm not happy with at all. So I know this is labeled as an infrared searchlight. I just wanted it to be a bright yellow searchlight for fighting in the dark. So this is a series of 2 different fluorescent yellows. It's, let me tell you exactly what it is. It's Vallejo Game Color Fluoro, and it's yellow fluorescent from Mecha Color, because they're slightly 2 different shades. And then just adding bits of white, and then just a little bit of pure white as it gets more and more closer to the inside. And that's all, again, done with, I did that with a brush, just wet blending the paint colors together. On camera right now, it's looking a lot better than it looks sitting holding in my hand. I hope it looks okay. And I did the same effect on the hull light over there. It looks a lot better on the hull because you can only see the edge a little bit as you're looking. I think that came out a little bit more effectively. And then I left it because I wanted to, when I did the overall matte coat over everything, I wanted the OSL to be matted down. I didn't want that to be shiny like everything else. For some of the copper effect colors, I went back to my good old trusty Tester's bottle. This to me is still one of the greatest brass colors when you're looking for a metallic brass in the world. And I hope I'll be able to find another one day. I might as well just buy another one now in case it runs out. But for the little brass accents, I love it. I love it. It's so, it just holds onto the brush so well and lets you apply it in fine detail wherever you need to go. I gave another little Nuln Oil wash around all the metallics, and then another little rusty wash around some of the metallics and some of the exposed metal. Then we wanted to do a little bit of battle scarring. And as you can see, they were originally just silver, but then I put some soot residue as if they got hit, and it left some scarring and a little bit of, you know, actual soot there. So I just took a small drill bit, can't remember the exact millimeter, drilled a little bit in, and then just used the hobby knife to carve the little star formation to show some scrapes of metal, some little chipping there. Not a whole lot, just a few little areas in here to show the tank getting some battle damage. Painted that in with gunmetal, gave it a little rusty wash again, and then I took just some chalk pastels, ground it up, put it on a Q-tip, dabbed it into the actual hole, and then swiped it in the flow of airflow, in the direction of the airflow. That effect is pretty good. It looks okay. Once I got all the basic colors on, I used Green Stuff World Max Matte, which is now my favorite matte. It used to be Winsor & Newton, which is still a great matte coat. This just is a lot easier to airbrush. So airbrush that on everything, let it dry, and then I went to town doing lenses and all that stuff. I used a few different Vallejo shifter colors to do our driver's lens over here, to do the periscope lenses on the cupola, and then to do gunner sight and some of these, I don't know, optics, whatever they happen to be, optics on the gun shield and over here, and gave each of those just a little dot of gauzy, which is a really nice acrylic top coat. Just a little dot with a toothpick to cover it, and also on the lights and everything. And then we were just about done. All of this mud work is acrylic Vallejo mud. So I started on the bottom here with mud and grass, which gives it more of a chunky look. Basically what it is model grass mixed in with mud. I mean, and they put it in a bottle and you just kind of stick it on and it gives you the chunky look. Then I just used European mud all around the rest of the tracks and splattered a little bit on, and that way I kept the real chunky mud on the bottom where it would grab onto and stick, you know, and a lot of near the top, this is the mud minus the grass that has flown off as it drives. It's still muddy on the top, and it will pick up that mud again as it goes, you know, back down. I didn't top coat that with anything. That is just on there and dried, and that way it has a little bit of a slight wet look compared to the matte coating that's on everything there. And that looks good. What I skipped when it was still glossy, I put some markings on the tank, obviously, some standard Cadian marking, the Cadian gate. The tank's number is 231, so every tank in my regiment has an individual number, every single one of them. And I actually have, yes, a spreadsheet, so I know I'm not repeating that same number twice. This number, so every squadron has a color pattern, and they're numbered 1, 2, and 3. So Steel Tread is tank number 2 of the 3 tanks in this particular squadron. By hand, because it describes it in the book, I painted kill markings that the bolster gunners have painted onto their little sponsons over there. I did that with a very fine brush and white paint. And the help of a magnifying glass, because my eyes aren't that good anymore. And so there's not a lot of markings on this, just some very basic ones. And then I hand painted. I tried to print my own decals, but the thing is, all the other markings were white, and I don't have an Alps printer to print white. So rather than printing it in black, I just hand painted Steel Tread right there. And in the book, it also gets the marking Giant Killer after they destroy a heretic titan, but I just didn't decide to put that on there. So this was a really fun project, and you know, after having listened to the whole book and, you know, listening to the exploits, trials and tribulations of the crew of Steel Tread, I really wanted to have Steel Tread in my list, and so this was a great way to do it. Now, yeah, I could have just gotten a Leman Russ kit and did it that way, but again, I liked 3D printing it. I liked creating it from parts as I went. That was a lot of fun to do. And by the way, although it takes a long time with a 3D printer, for the cost of the actual filament itself, for $5, somewhere between $5 and $10, I made this entire Leman Russ. Now, of course, you have to have already, invested in the printer. You have to buy a roll of filament. But when you actually measure out how much the filament it is and measure it by the meter, by the foot, by the whatever, and figure out the price, yeah, you can print out a whole tank for like a total of $5, between $5 and $10, depending on how big it is and how much detail you put on it and everything. So, $55 for the kit. With 3D printing, by the way, though, I was able to take the Leman Russ kit. Is it over here? Yeah. I was able to take the rest of the pieces that are left over in the Leman Russ kit with my 3D printer and make 2 complete tanks out of that kit. So you get kind of the top of the hull and the other turret and some other sponsons, and I just printed out some sides and tracks and a whole bottom, and bing bang, you've got another Leman Russ ready to go out of that box. So it's cool that, in the new release, they combined the Demolisher and the standard Leman Russ into one big box, and you end up with those extra parts. Just to give you an idea of size, so this is one of my new Penal Legion troops. Yeah, I had 2 squads of the old models, the old Imperial Guard models that I had to build. I have the new ones too. So I used the old ones to make a Penal Legion formation, which is why they're in orange jumpsuits with barcodes on their arms. But to give you an idea of the size, so here's regular GW Leman Russ with a soldier, and then you can see that steel tread's a bit bigger than that. And yeah. So this was, I really enjoyed doing this, and now I have probably 6 printed Leman Russ models of various types in various stages of production, because it's just easy to do and it's fun to do, and you can mix and match and swap different options from different STL files that you download. The rest of them have magnetized main gun, like so do these, but they're just, you swap them. I wish I had one to show you right now. I don't, but you'll see another video on it later. You just got a magnet here and a magnet at the end of the gun, and you just boop, plug it in. You can have any weapon you want. Really cool. So, yep, that's my steel tread. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing it. Maybe some of you actually recognize it. Some people might have never heard of that tank before, but I really enjoyed it. I hope you liked hearing a little bit about how it was done and how we got it to look like this. It will be in a squad with 2 other tanks that look nothing like it, but that's why it'll stand out on the tabletop as steel tread. It'll be a little bit bigger, it'll have a different camouflage, it'll have its specific markings, and it'll definitely look like a different Leman Russ than most others on the table. So let me know what you guys think. And if you're 3D printing stuff for your army too, let me know. What are you guys doing? What are you making? Like, what's taking up a lot of your time? Are you printing actual... It's hard to find actual files of actual vehicles, but there's lots of things, because a lot of them get removed for copyright stuff, but there's a ton of stuff that you can use as proxies for different things. And unless you're playing in an official tournament where the rules are, I think there's a certain percentage of GW plastic that needs to be on the model. If you're just playing a friendly game at the hobby shop or with your friends, these are all good to go. So I hope you enjoyed it, guys, and I hope you'll be around for the next one. For everybody out there doing their own stuff out in YouTube land, keep building them, build them well, and I'll see you guys in the next video real soon.